So Kevin, you touched on a lot of the tech trends and buzzwords that security integrators, some of the things that they are evaluating these days. Given the various stages these trends are in, how can integrators make sense of these trends to make wise investment decisions for their businesses?
Well, the first thing is to start with some training and research. I think is always a good thing, because we talk about the terms, the buzzwords, etc., and there's certainly a lot of information out there about that. And what I tried to break it down were what are kind of the fundamentals. We know what we have today. We have customers and they have systems and they have needs, and we need to meet those. But we also know that there's a pressure for things to change. So what I often think for customers and for partners today is to start with what you have and then describe how do you want to evolve it. So as I described today, that if you look at that we have systems running on the edge in what we would call a 3.0 environment. And if you want to try to move certain things around, let's say into called the edge computing layer, what I refer to as fog, or sometimes referred to as cloud on the ground, which I think is a clever term, that you can find that there's systems that can bridge kind of what you have today versus what you have tomorrow. So perfect example for systems integrators is that sizing the storage solution that we put into a customer's premise is often an estimate. So how do we then take and utilize infrastructure as a service, which is sitting up on demand, available for us? How can I right size or undersize what I'm putting on the customer's site? And then if I need to use more, in effect, storage, I can try to move that off the premise to a different location. So I think the key is to work on the problems that the situation or the problems where we have today, where we're guessing, or we're estimating, that they're adding additional cost that's may or may not be used, and those are easy targets to move out.
And for those that are hesitant to use some of these newer technologies in their deployments, how would you advise them on going about, sort of easing into the use of those technologies?
The first thing is they need to do what they did before, because this isn't the first innovation cycle that we've gone through, which is why I tried to articulate that in Security 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, and 5.0. And many resellers today have businesses that started in 1.0 or maybe started in 2.0. So they've gone through an example of this type of innovation. So if you look back, what did we do when we were in 2.0, which was digital and DVRs and everybody wanted that, but then suddenly there was these network cameras, and how did we evolve with that? Because now if you look at it, network cameras are the standard, and there aren't any or very few manufacturers that are actually focused on analog. And so what I would say is to look at what you did back then and to use those same practices to move forward, because it's the same situation, same dilemmas. How do I decide? When do I decide? How much does it cost? These are all things. And what we did when we transitioned from 2.0 to 3.0 is the first step is we experimented. I asked everybody today, how many people in the audience have a drone? Which resellers or systems integrators, guys like me, would not want to have a drone? I mean, you're now mobile, you're autonomous, you're cloud, and you're relevant and quite interesting to play with. I have friends that are in different industries, construction or transportation, and I just had a dinner conversation about it, and I said, hey, you're a construction supervisor, you're working on all these things, you're as low tech as it gets, but have you ever thought about getting a drone for your site? He goes, what would I do with it? I said, well, first of all, you would be able to take fantastic pictures of the progress of the work, and I'll bet you that the people would find that work very interesting. He went out and bought a drone. And he says they come up with new ideas to use the drone every week about how they can improve their operations. Just from the fact of inspecting subcontractors was an example. To be able to use the drone, they can launch the drone, they can go up, did it get done? Yes, done, drone back, they move on to the next one. And they can get such close photos of the work and document that they actually did do the work. There's so many different ways that we can use this. If I'm a systems integrator, I'm hanging cameras that are up high, I would have a drone with me. And I would have that drone there to physically document what we did, how we did it. I mean, there's just so much you can do.
And of all the trends you touched on and the various places that they land on the hype curve that you showed this morning, which ones do you think are best poised to make a big impact on the industry sooner rather than later?
It's a good question, because I showed three different hype curves. You know, if we talk about AI, to me, AI is where I think we have the biggest opportunity is going to be in virtual reality, augmented reality, and deep learning. Now, how does that work for any particular systems integrator? Again, it starts with some sort of experimentation. But when it comes to the deep learning and the artificial intelligence on the first device, the device we think about is a drone or a camera, this is the place I would start experimenting. If I look at it from a hype curve on cloud, the technologies that are the simplest to use, public cloud storage. It's one of the most mature cloud technologies. It's more than 50% penetration. It's ready for prime time. Infrastructure as a service is right behind it. These are great ways to do that. I would also look at software as a service. I mean, there are companies that you can go experiment. You get one channel, see if it works, start learning how to do it, put it in your house. I mean, this is how we see markets evolving. Is you first have to have some knowledge and education, which is why when I talk today about it, you have to start with some training and certification. You have to start learning. The minute you stop learning is the minute you start falling behind. We transitioned from 2.0 to 3.0, and every major manufacturer today, Access, Milestone, Genentech, etc., they all invested heavily in their training programs.
And you know, AI has been a big theme here at MIPS and pretty much every industry show for the past several years, and for good reason. But you know, given how the market has been burned by analytics in the past, do you think the industry is going to need I guess a canary in the coal mine, so to speak, to really prove its value before it gains more widespread adoption? What will it look like?
Absolutely. So there was this speech that I just watched on YouTube just 2 days ago, and this conference of extremely smart people, scientists, basically it's a scientific conference. We're talking about an award that they were giving called the Test of Time Award. And basically what they had done is they looked back 10 years and they said, what AI type paper written 10 years ago is still relevant today? And they give an award about it. I think it's a really interesting idea, the Test of Time Award. And this particular scientist that got up, that these two guys had authored this, talked about what they thought about 10 years ago and how it's still relevant today. And one of the things at the end of this presentation they talked about is that AI is the equivalent of alchemy. And alchemy, if you think back hundreds of years ago, was a pseudoscience of creating different chemical compositions to try to cure people, which included, of course, using leeches to suck people's blood, and somehow they would think that would cure them, or taking lead and turning it into gold with some different ways of alchemy. And the scientist was saying that today's AI is the equivalent of alchemy. We don't exactly know why it works or doesn't work, but we have to continue to try to find the reasons for that. And then he referred to that it took 100 years of scientific research to prove that the alchemy was wrong, or the alchemists were wrong. So again, it is not the point of saying today it works. It's about today is figuring out why it works. Why does it work here and it doesn't work there? We have had too narrow of a focus in the analytics that were delivered in what I call, again, Security 3.0. They were very tightly fitted to work in a very small set of environments. Now, what we have seen is that we don't have the compute limitations we had before. And so in that hype curve I was showing is the only mature technology in AI today is GPUs. And this is the reason why Milestone prioritized it when we were looking at our software of using GPUs to decode video. Companies like NVIDIA, Intel, which Barry talked about how we use the GPUs. So today, that's where I would start. Start with the GPUs. Start using and figuring out how to apply them, but be conscious of where we are in the practical applications of it. But again, it takes training, it takes research, it takes time for these technologies to become realized.
And lastly, Kevin, what advice would you give integrators as they look to, as you put it, pivot their business to take advantage of the latest and greatest innovation?
The first thing is that you need to recognize that there is something happening, right? And so this is why we invited Jeffrey Parker to talk about supply side economics versus demand side economics. And Jeffrey had an opportunity to sit and talk to different resellers during the meeting, and he came back and he says, so the challenge with their business today is very much a pipeline supply business. What they have to pivot towards is how can they work facilitating demand? How can you participate on a platform? We look at as an example companies like Amazon, and we think Amazon's destroying retail. But actually it's not. It's actually increasing retail. It's bringing retail to retailers that weren't retailers before. And what companies figured out how to do is how could they work with Amazon to build their business. And it's been an amazing thing. eBay did the same thing. PayPal did the same thing. So what my encouragement is that if I'm a reseller, I need to understand these platforms. In the United States, we have what's called Angie's List. Angie's List, what did Angie's List do? It basically took people's profiles, they built a review on it, and said, here's the services that I would have to build confidence that this was the right company to work with. So if I'm a reseller today, it's how do I build more profiles? How do I provide more interaction with my brand? How do I learn to sell and service on platforms? And to work closely with my customers to identify what is referred to as trapped value. Today we put security cameras in place for security, but there's a significant amount of value and data that comes out of that. A good example of how trapped value is being released is when you look at safe city initiatives, where it's a combination of public and private companies working together, organizations working together to try to release the value. The private company puts in the camera to protect their building, but they release the value of that device and that asset in the video for use for public consumption and public safety. It's a perfect example of finding these types of areas. Jeffrey didn't get a chance to talk about it today, but there's also an area where you take a reseller today. Resellers can become developers on the platform. You don't have to just be a reseller. You can make your pivot from a service provider to a technology provider. The tools are getting so easy to use, you can start developing that. Tomorrow you're going to see SAST and OSSA, the Open Security Safety Alliance, talk about how we're bringing Android as an industry to the devices. Now the reason is not to just make a different device. The reason is to bring Android development tools to the masses. So now, and we've proven this, we can put together what's called a hackathon. We can take people who know how to build an Android device, and they can start creating intelligent devices, applications using Android and using the tools from SAST. So again, my encouragement would be, I am today a service provider, and I'm going to continue to be a service provider, but how could I pivot to also being advising the asset owners on trap value, and then also for determining how can I participate as a technology company, build an application, use that application on a particular platform, and differentiate your services. You'll find you'll make more money doing that in the long run than you will have done the services.